This video is on personal resumes, and I will be going over the goal of a resume, what to include in your resume, and kind of how the format should look. Okay, so the first thing we're going to go over are resume goals. The entire purpose of a resume is to list your accomplishments that you've had so far in your life in a list fashion. You're going to highlight skills that you think are applicable to whatever job that you want to get, or just applicable skills to life. You know, these are things that you've accomplished in your life that you want to highlight. You want to be able to show your employer your experiences. So if you have a specific job in mind, you want to make sure you pull in those skills and talents and honors that you've experienced for that job. Requirements for your resume, you want to make sure you keep it kind of as short and sweet and to the point as possible. You know, people who are interviewing others don't have a lot of time to sift through hundreds of pages of different people's resumes, so you want to keep it as short as possible. For you all in high school currently, your resume is not going to be that long. I would say keep it to under 1 page, just because you haven't experienced a lot professionally in your life yet. Once you go off to college, once you start working and you start adding experiences to your resume, of course your resume is going to get longer, but you still want to keep it as short as possible. Keep in mind that if 50 people apply for the one job that you want to make sure that your resume is easy to read. So always keep that in mind when you write it. Make your format visually pleasing. What that means is make sure that your headers and the way that you format your essay is very consistent. You want to make sure that it's visually pleasing to the eye. Whoever's looking at it, you want to make sure that they enjoy looking at it and can easily read it. This is a given. This one should be pretty self-explanatory, but you always want to make sure that you have correct grammar and spelling. I've had a lot of experiences where I've been the interviewer and I've been interviewing teachers for jobs. And if I see in an application or on a resume grammatical mistakes or spelling mistakes, this may sound harsh, but I automatically put them in the no pile. You can't be a professional, especially in education, and have grammatical mistakes. So you always want to make sure that you edit, you look over your resume multiple times, you get other people to look at it. This is a very important thing. You want to always make sure that you maintain your professionalism. So your resume has several different sections, and the first section should always be your contact section. I'm going to show you my personal resume, and I'm going to show you how I've formatted it, what I've included in each section. But your contact section should have the following things: your full name, that's your first, middle, and last. If you go by a nickname, make sure that you put in your full name, your actual name. You want to make sure you include an email address. Now, very important to consider here. Make sure that your email address is professional. Okay, if your email address is currently something along the lines of I love to hunt at gmail.com or dancergirl at Gmail, you want to make sure that you change and make an email address that is your name. Professionals and employers who are looking to hire people don't really look too highly on email addresses that are a little juvenile. So if you don't have an email address that's professional, you need to do that, okay, before you make your resume. You want to include your permanent address. Your permanent address is your home address. Once you go off to college, you'll understand what this means a little bit more. Permanent address is where you receive most of your mail, not necessarily where you live all the time, okay? You want to include your phone number if you use a cell phone more often than a landline, or if you even have a landline. Make sure you include the phone number that you use and that you check voicemail to often, okay? If you have a personal website, then make sure that you include that as well, if it's professional. Don't include a website to a blog that's inappropriate. So if you have a website that would help your employer get to know you or show the skills that you possess, that's something that you will want to include. Oh, before I do that, let me show you my contact section. So on my resume, this is my contact section. I centered it and made it bold so it's, the eye is drawn to it. Address here, phone number, and my email address. One thing could probably include is my class website, which I have not added to this, but if I were looking to get a new teaching job, that's something I would probably add to this resume. Okay, so this is my contact section. The next section down here, and I don't think I included this in the presentation, but you always want to put an objective. An objective section is so that your employer knows exactly why you want this job and what you plan on doing, okay? So my objective is to obtain a job teaching English at the high school level. Short, sweet, to the point. The employer knows exactly why I'm here and what job I've applied for, okay? Keep in mind that your employer may have several different jobs that they're hiring for. So if you have applied for something, you always want to put your objectives so that you stand out from any other applicant, okay? Okay, the next section is your education section. This is where you include the full name and location of whatever school you have recently completed. Okay, so for you all, you will put Ashe County High School. You will want to make sure that you put not just ACHS, you spell out the entire name. Put location, you don't need to put the address, but you do want to put West Jefferson, North Carolina. You want to put the date of your graduation. Of course, right now you all have not officially graduated, but you know it will be sometime in June of 2015. So go ahead and put that down. I know that it hasn't happened yet, but most of you, crossing your fingers, will actually get there, so you want to go ahead and put that on your resume, okay? If your GPA is over, oops, typo there, but if your GPA is over 3.0, include that in your education section. If it's under 3.0, don't include that. Don't really want to brag on, not that it's not a decent GPA, but you don't really want to put that because that shows that you may not have been as focused on academics as you should have been, okay? On mine, here's my example. So I have my master's degree from Appalachian State and my bachelor's degree also from Appalachian State. Notice I included the location, not the address, but just the location, and I included the dates that I attended, and that last date there would be when I graduated. Notice I didn't put my high school on there because at this point in my career, no one cares where I went to high school, and it doesn't really matter that I have a high school degree. It's kind of understood that if I have my master's and my bachelor's, that I also have a high school degree. But at this point in my career, I don't include that. The next section is going to be your experience, and you might end up breaking these sections into their own separate sections. One thing you want to include is any work experience that you've had. If you had a job, a paying job, you want to include that there. You also want to include a little bit of a detail about what specifically you did at that job, okay? Same thing with volunteer experience. If you volunteered at a nonprofit or worked for a nonprofit, include that in your experience section, and also include a brief description on what you did, what the skills and the duties that you did day to day. Any leadership experience you also want to include. Specifically, those of you in Dick Miller Youth Leadership want to include that here. That's something that colleges and employers look very highly on if you did something outside of school that is leadership related. And again, you can make the separate sections if you have enough experience for each one. On my resume, I have teaching related experience. That's obviously important for me. So I listed all the schools that I've taught at, and I also listed things that I did at that school, or honors that I accumulated there. Leadership positions, honors, any committee that I was on, any team that I was on, anything that I sponsored outside of school. And of course, as always, put that date on the right side, okay? Down here, I could probably delete stuff like substitute. Those things are not important enough to really include, but one thing to consider is that once you start accumulating experiences, your employers are going to wonder, oh, well, there was a gap between 2005 and 2003. What were they doing? Were they unemployed? Did they get fired? So that's why I include these things in the middle, so they know that I was employed throughout that time, okay? Okay, next is your honors and activities section. This may overlap from your experience section, but if it's separate enough that you need to include it in your honors, then go ahead and put it on there a second time. In this section, you want to include any honors or awards that you've gotten for whatever reason, any extracurricular things that you've participated in that includes sports and clubs, and if you've had any leadership positions within those extracurriculars, you include that here as well. So if on a sports team you were the captain, you want to include that. If on a club you were the president, you include that as well, okay? And as usual, if you had any particular duties on that, you want to make sure you include that here. For example, if you were the treasurer for a club, you might want to say that you handled the money and receipt writing for the club, okay? That's important for the employer to know that you had certain responsibilities given to you. Okay, on my resume, I have a separate leadership section, again with the dates here, and extracurricular section with the dates. And notice that for mine, at this point in my career, again, I've accumulated a lot of experience. So I did not really do a lot of detail. With these for teaching, it's kind of self-explanatory what they are. But you can see here that with sports, you want to include any leadership position, okay? Even Bible school stuff, guys. I mean, stuff that you've done at your church, include that kind of stuff. Any position that you've had that you think is important, you include it, okay? This kind of goes back to the last slide, but notice here that I've highlighted this section of work experience. This is a long time ago, y'all. This is, back when I was in high school. And just like I don't have my high school listed under education, I probably could take this stuff out. The fact that I worked at a library, the fact that I was a babysitter or a child care provider, the fact that I worked in retail, it's kind of important to know that I worked through high school, but not necessarily important to my teaching career at this point. So I could take this out at this point. Your references section, this is a section where you choose people who, if you were chosen for the job or chosen for an interview, your future employer might call those people to ask about, how reliable are you, how true is all this, tell me a little bit more about this person. So you want to choose 2 to 3 reliable people, include their contact info, especially include their email address, and make sure that you ask the person before you include them on your resume. There have been many times that students have included me as a reference, and I had no idea, and it's been 5 years since I've taught them. So you want to make sure that your reference is prepared and does the research and knows that they may be called later on. My reference section is, there's my honors and activities section. Notice how I made that separate, okay? My references section is, just a few people. I chose current principal, former principal, a former supervisor, and a college professor. So you want to kind of make it a lot of different types of people. Maybe don't include 2 to 3 teachers. Maybe have 1 teacher, 1 community leader like a pastor or youth minister or someone that maybe worked with you in a leadership position. So kind of vary your references section, okay? Okay, here's some tips real quick. Make sure that your resume doesn't have any first person pronouns, no I, no me, no our, no we. All of those need to be taken out. Make sure that you maintain consistency. This is not only in what words you use, but the format. So notice in mine how everything is lined up exactly. All of my headers look exactly the same, okay? Everything is lined up. All of my dates are lined up on the right side. All of my bullet points line up exactly, okay? So again, make sure that everything is consistent. Start descriptions with a verb. So if you did a certain job, you want to make sure that you start that with a verb. Choose a legible font that looks good to the eye. Make sure it looks good to read. And any final copy should be printed on quality paper. Don't pull a Legally Blonde and make it on pink paper and spritz it with perfume. You want to make sure that it is on nice paper that looks quality, high quality. Make sure that it looks good and professional, okay? So that's all that we have on resumes. Y'all ask me questions if you have any. Bye.